Hello, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. I hope you're not in that afternoon slump. I've told Jeff and Alex they have to up the energy so you all stay nice and awake to get through the rest of the day. It's my pleasure to introduce Jeff and Alex to the stage. They are from App Dynamics, and they're going to be talking about my favorite topic, Jira Service Desk, because I am the marketing manager for Jira Service Desk, so this is a little passion of mine. Jeff is actually a world record holder as a participant in the world's largest Nerf battle. So if you want to ask him about that after the talk, he's more than happy to answer questions about that or Jira Service Desk, which is probably what you care more about. And we also have Alex, who actually uses Trello to help with his songwriting. So if you want to learn how he does that or get some tips and tricks about using Trello for any other weird ways of doing things, please chat to him about that. Or again, you can ask him about Jira Service Desk. We will hold Q&A to the end of the session. I'll run around with the mic taking questions, and then you can track them down later outside, follow them around, and stalk them if you want more questions after that. So let's welcome them to the stage.
So first, I want to start by introducing Charlie Horse. So maybe many of you are in the app and are familiar with following the Ogimals, as we call them. So Charlie's going to be joining us up on stage. My name is Jeff. I manage build and release engineering for App Dynamics. So we build our product and get it out in front of all of our customers. And as you might imagine, there is some degree of Atlassian tools involved in that process. So that's why I'm here to talk with you today. And we're here to talk specifically.
Yep. Yeah, my name is Alex. I work for App Dynamics as well. I'm the Atlassian Suite engineering lead. So I am all day, every day within Jira, Confluence, and Bitbucket. So I eat, breathe, and sleep Atlassian stuff. So.
Cool.
Yep.
So I hope everybody had a good meal. Sorry you can't take a nap right afterwards because we're going to keep you engaged and pumped up after lunch because we were told to do so, I think. But we are here today to talk to you about implementing Jira Service Desk at scale to support a growing organization.
Yeah, so today we're going to cover, well, first we'll talk a little bit about App Dynamics and what we do as a company outside of what we specifically do for App Dynamics. Then we'll move on to actually how we support a growing organization, some general concepts that we're going to cover. We'll also talk about our history with Atlassian products and how we use Atlassian services at App Dynamics and why we didn't continue to use Jira software to enable our support teams to work, as well as cover some of the features for why we chose Jira Service Desk. After that, we'll move into why we chose Jira Data Center as our deployment option, as well as how we're using Service Desk beyond just for support teams.
All right, so App Dynamics. What can we tell you about App Dynamics? First off, we have 2,000 employees, so I think you can start to see why we were looking at Data Center in the early days, because we didn't have the power to see into the future to know what they were going to talk about at today's keynote. We are also recently acquired by Cisco, which means not only do we have to worry about our 2,000 employees at App Dynamics, but we also have a global network of over 78,000 employees that may need to integrate or communicate with any of our employees at App Dynamics. And specifically within App Dynamics, we operate in over 10 offices in San Francisco, San Jose, Dallas, London, India, and many more across the world. But what do we actually do? So we make the digital world work. That's kind of our slogan. But again, what do we do? So most of you are familiar with application performance monitoring. We are known as a monitoring organization. Beyond traditional APM, we also offer things like database monitoring and user monitoring. So if somebody says, you notice that Jira's slow, you can actually see what they clicked on to cause it to be slow. And we track all of this through what we call business transactions, meaning instead of just getting server alerts that something is happening within a Java virtual machine or a backend server, we're actually going to track, was the purchase successful? Was the checkout working? Things that an executive would be able to understand to track their business journey. Now that we're part of the Cisco family, we are looking to expand into the network layer so that we can truly deliver the world's first complete end-to-end performance stack. So that breaks down into one of our other popular catchphrases, that we look to transform the way modern business is built and run using automated cross-stack intelligence for continuous business and application performance monitoring. Because as we all know, the more buzzwords we can fit into one sentence, the more important or impressive that's going to sound, right? So how did we start this journey? AppDynamics was founded in 2008 as a software company in the Bay Area, and the very first thing that we knew as a software company was that we needed the best issue tracker, bug tracker, and documentation tools to enable rapid growth in our startup days. So we actually implemented Jira Cloud for our product teams right away. Fast forward 8 years, we were quite a different organization at that point, growing very rapidly, and we decided that our code base needed a little bit better protection and high availability, so we migrated into Bitbucket Data Center. And then later, in that same year, in Q1, we decided it was also time to take Jira out of the cloud because our user count was growing, and we wanted to bring Jira closer to our Bitbucket instance, and we brought Jira in-house to Data Center as well. Now, we had a cool decision to make at this point. How do we license or buy Jira Data Center? At this point, we decided it was a good point to introduce a new product to AppDynamics, which was Service Desk, what everybody's here to learn about today. And then if you fast forward to the present day, we had such a good initial run with Service Desk with our IT team that we actually have expanded Service Desk to include the majority of our support teams at AppDynamics.
Yeah, so across our organization, our teams use several tools within the Atlassian suite to track their work. As Jeff mentioned, we use Jira Software and Bitbucket in our product organization to enable our engineering teams to actually build the AppDynamics product itself. We also utilize Confluence for our internal collaboration and documentation, as well as our public-facing documentation for all of our customers. But what we really want to get into today is how we use Jira Service Desk to align our various support teams internally, like IT, HR, and facilities, and enable those seemingly disconnected teams to help support the rapidly growing organization.
Because as you all know, supporting a growing organization is not an easy task. In fact, last year alone, AppDynamics onboarded more than 700 new employees. Even in small organizations, there are so many moving parts and teams that it takes to keep a company going. You've got teams like IT supporting the tools that you and your team members use every day. You have got HR in charge of getting new employees onboarded, managing their benefits and training. You have facilities working on making your offices a great place to work, and many more. All of these teams working behind the scenes enable an organization to function, and if your organization is growing at any rate, these processes and services that these teams manage only become more and more complex over time. It might be easy to set up an email alias, right? You just set up one email, you put everybody in a distribution list, and then we're going to respond and support people that way. But ensuring that requests are taken care of in both a timely manner and that nothing slips through the cracks is almost impossible when you're that simplified.
So with that in mind, we'd like to cover several of the many reasons why we chose Jira Service Desk as a tool to enable our support teams to align and support the business, while also keeping scalability in mind. But first, before I go into Jira Service Desk, I do want to talk about our history with using Jira software to enable our support teams at AppDynamics, and why we felt there was a better solution available to us. Until about a year ago, our Jira instance was hosted in the cloud, and while the original that was the original Jira instance that was used when AppDynamics was founded. And so at the time, the company was pretty small, and our users were pretty familiar with the Jira UI. The first iteration of using Jira to enable support teams was a traditional Jira software project for tracking IT support requests. And keep in mind that this was before Jira Service Desk was even a thing, as well as before there was a differentiation between Jira Core, Jira Software, and Service Desk as well. And as we mentioned earlier, last year was a year of tremendous growth for our company. We onboarded, like we said, 700 new employees. So it was becoming clear that we needed to adjust our approach for supporting such a rapidly growing organization. So we made the decision to migrate from Jira Cloud to Data Center, and with that migration, we decided to adopt Service Desk for our teams as well. We decided on Service Desk for a few reasons. Not everyone in our organization actually requires a Jira license. In the Jira software licensing model, for that to work for an IT support team that supports the entire organization, every user within that organization requires a Jira software license. Jira Service Desk actually introduces the concept of agent versus customer users. So for licensing, you actually only need to grant licenses to agents. And those agents are the people who are actually taking care of the requests and responding to them as they come in. Where customers, who are the users who are actually submitting the requests to you, they no longer require a Jira software license. So since we no longer actually need to give out a license to those users, that was an immediate save on our costs for licensing for Jira. Another reason we decided to switch from software to Service Desk was for the ease of use for all employees who might not be super familiar with the Jira UI. Because most of these people who are making these requests, they may not actually be in Jira every day, like some of our developers are, or some of the people who are actually like our agent users. So I'll cover this in a bit more detail later, but Service Desk does allow you to create a customer-friendly user portal for all of your support teams. The UI of that portal is much easier for someone who might not be familiar with Jira, and easier for them to understand. It also doesn't involve the overhead of having to learn the Jira UI just to submit to IT that your laptop isn't turning on or something like that. On a similar note, our support teams were already familiar with Jira because they've been using a software project before. So for these agent users, the UI is virtually unchanged with a couple of new additions here and there. There are some really powerful features that come with Service Desk as well, such as SLAs and the ability to configure automation rules. These features aren't readily available in Jira software, and while you could argue that you could implement some of this functionality using apps from the Atlassian marketplace, these features come by default within Service Desk. With that, these new features, such as like SLAs and automation rules, these are all configurable at the project administrator level. So I no longer require a global Jira admin like myself to go do these things for our project teams. I can train a project level admin to go do those changes whenever they need to without having to come to me as like a gatekeeper. So let's dive a little bit deeper into how we utilize these features that I just talked about from Jira Service Desk and why we did choose Service Desk over other tools. So in this section, we'll talk a little bit how we monitor team health using SLAs and reports. Then we'll move into an overview of how we utilize automation rules to enable our teams to do more with less. We'll also cover how we've configured a user-friendly support portal to act as a one-stop shop for our organization's support needs. Finally, we'll discuss how all of these areas can help align support teams across a growing organization. First, I'd like to cover how we use SLAs and reports to evaluate team health. If you're not familiar with SLAs, these are service level agreements, or commonly set goals for a team to commit to. And that can be something that you've imposed on yourself or your team, or something that you're actually contractually obligated to fulfill. Jira Service Desk does allow you to set custom SLAs on a project to track what matters most to you and your team. Once you set these SLAs, you can view them in queues or on the requests themselves that your customers raise for you. You can also receive alerts for SLAs that are about to breach. Some practices we put into our SLAs, some of the best practices that we've done, we configure our SLA calendars based on our team's work schedules so that we're not getting inaccurate results. So our support team, let's say they work a regular 9-to-5 workday. We don't want those SLAs to breach or penalize them for outside their working hours. So we don't want those timers to count down during the evenings or on weekends. We'll also cover this a little bit more in a bit, but you can actually combine SLA configurations with automation rules to have like automatic follow-ups to customers, or if you need approval on requests, you can automatically close inactive requests, and there's some other scenarios to help automate processes for your support teams. It's also good practice to configure SLA goals based on different criteria. So let's say you have a request come in that's super high priority, and it might actually be good to have a higher SLA, or like a more strict SLA goal on those than you would for something that's lower priority. So like if a level one support request comes in, you might have a goal on that to address all of those within 1 hour of submission, and maybe every other request it's okay to get within the same workday or even the next workday. So with all of that in mind, some SLAs that we've configured for our teams include time to resolution for making sure that requests are handled in a timely manner, time to first response to make sure we're getting someone on a request as soon as possible, and time to first assignment to make sure we're managing our queue of incoming requests quickly and efficiently.
So once we have our SLAs configured and requests start coming in, we can start looking at reports to evaluate our team's health. Using some of Service Desk's built-in reports, like the workload report, SLA goals report, and customer satisfaction report, we can easily identify if any team members are overloaded with work. If they are, or if they're meeting their SLA goals or not, and we can keep an eye out for any specific issues that customers might provide in a satisfaction survey. We use a combination of these reports to make sure that our teams are staffed and resourced appropriately. If we find that some team members are overloaded with too many tickets, we can delegate some of those work items to other team members. If SLA goals are consistently not being met, then we can determine which goals are not being met and make decisions to either change a process or hire another person to join the support team. These built-in reports are great for showing us the big picture. But what if we're interested in trends? What if we want to see a different time frame? Or maybe I'm just a more visual person. Service Desk allows you to create custom reports based on the SLAs that you've configured. We can easily create a report to see if we're improving with particular SLA goals. Are we doing better with our time to first response than we did last week or last month? Has customer satisfaction increased or decreased over time? These reports help us evaluate team health and make decisions to improve the team's health if needed.
Speaking of a team's health, there's a super powerful feature in Service Desk that we utilize constantly to do more with less, and those are automation rules. As an organization grows, the volume with which we get those support requests is only going to increase. And those automation rules can help our support teams address more and more of these requests without having to hire more people to address the onslaught of requests that are going to continue to come in. In our support teams projects, we have quite a few of these rules configured to help agents complete their work faster and address things more quickly. Using SLA timers, I mentioned this briefly before, we have a rule that actually marks a request as inactive if the requester hasn't gotten back to us within a couple of days. On top of that, we have another rule that will automatically close those inactive requests to ensure our support queues don't get jammed up with requests that really are no longer valid, or the requester is just never going to get back to us, and we can just close it out. To make sure that agents also see customer responses, we have a rule to update the status of a request automatically when the requester comments on the request. And this makes it go into a status that our agents monitor in a queue, so that way they can see it very easily and see what's ready for them to work. For requests that come in from the executive staff, we actually automatically increase the priority of those requests to make sure it goes to the top of the queue immediately. For some small purchasing requests, we actually automatically approve some of these requests if they come in under a certain dollar amount, because we don't want to have to go through obtaining approval if it's just going to be approved anyway, so we can just get it in, mark it approved, and get it out. So there's a ton of options here to help your teams do more with less, but hopefully some of these examples give you some idea of how you can improve the productivity and sanity of your team without giving them too much overhead and configuration. So while some of these rules sound like they might be complicated to configure, it's actually pretty easy to set these up. As an example here, this is actually our configuration for one of the rules I just mentioned. So if a request is waiting on the requester, and for maybe 2 days, we can automatically update the status to inactive. In this case, we actually configured an SLA called waiting on customer with a goal of 2 days. And when that goal is breached, and if the request is in the waiting on customer status, we then transition the request to inactive. At the same time, we're able to leave an automated comment to give the requester some context as to why we're actually marking the request as inactive, with some instructions to also tell them to leave a comment or respond to the email notification that they got to actually reopen the request automatically using another automation rule. Another automation rule that we have is for auto-classifying a request type if the request is created in the traditional Jira create screen. As I mentioned before, our agents on our support team are actually still used to using Jira software. So it's the Jira create screen, if you're familiar with Jira software yourself, is still very familiar to them as well. And so sometimes our agents will actually create a request on behalf of the requester, whether that be like through they walk up to the desk or they send that person an email individually, and they just want to get some visibility to the rest of the team and put it in Jira. In these cases, the agent might actually find it easier to create the request in the Jira create screen instead of navigating to the portal themselves. So when creating a request like this, a request type is not actually applied, nor does an email confirmation go out to the requester with a link to go view the request at any time. So to provide some flexibility to our agents, we set this rule to automatically set the request type based on the request, as well as fire off an email to the requester with a link to go view that request in the customer portal.
So we've talked a lot about how we can create a scalable experience for the support teams to process requests once they're created, but what about the actual submission process? Service Desk features a user-friendly customer portal that you configure for the intake of requests, and a well-configured portal can make a huge difference in productivity, both for the requesters and the support team members. As an example of something you can do on this form, we've translated the name of the due date field to pose the question, when do you need the badge? Which in turn allows our requesters to actually complete the back-end fields for our agents without even knowing it.
We've defined some pretty specific request types to better capture what we need from a requester. So in Service Desk, multiple request types can actually be mapped to the same issue type in Jira, and based on the request type, you can automatically set some custom field values based on the request to make sure an agent gets the information that he or she might need to fulfill that request. So let's say you have an access request issue type. It's similar. It would probably be something similar to what I have up here. You could create several different request types for like maybe a Jira access request or Bitbucket access request. And based on them just clicking one of those options, you don't have to ask them in a separate field what service they need access to. It'll automatically set that field value for you, so the agent doesn't have to spend their time asking the user what service you might need access to, and it's also one less data point of entry for the requester to submit to you as well. We also recommend always just having like a general question or general request type in case the requester isn't sure which request type to use. Even if you have like 30 different request types, it's just good to have a generic one so that they can come to you and just get the request into you as easily as possible. It's also good to capture specific details, but also make sure that you don't require everything on a form. And make sure you only require specifically what you absolutely need to fulfill the request. It's better to get the request into your team than to not get that request at all, because a deterred requester is not a happy one. It's also good to provide some help text in the request forms to provide some clarity and instructions to your customers or your requesters and help guide user input to get the information that you need to fulfill that request as well. Using all these tips can help streamline request intake, getting your teams the information that they need to resolve a request as quickly as possible. Another benefit of the customer portal is that it acts as a single central portal for all employees in your organization. Each support team can have its own project to work in within a single Jira instance, but this portal consolidates all of those Service Desk projects into one location for your requesters. So you'll no longer have to figure out where to direct users to submit new requests to any support team, and users will no longer have to keep asking for the best method to submit a request to those teams. It's basically, like I said before, like a one-stop shop for anyone in your organization to find the help they need to do their jobs. Now, a major part of adopting Service Desk at AppDynamics was training and enablement. So all these tools are super cool, super useful, super awesome. But if we don't teach our users how to use them, we're probably not going to get much value out of this for our organization. If the support teams are fumbling over the great processes that we built for them, then our employees aren't probably going to want to work with them, and they're going to be deterred with working with those teams at all. So after building some of these new processes for our support teams, we created documentation and Confluence for them to share easily with each other. Agents can go in and review this information anytime in case they have questions about how the processes work. As we rolled out Service Desk to each support team, I scheduled hands-on sessions with each of these teams to show them how to use their new projects. I spent time going through the life cycle of requests, and this includes what it looks like for the customer as well, because if they don't understand what the customer or the requester is going through, then, or if they understand that, it's going to make it a bit easier, and they're going to understand where the requester might be coming from. I also spend some time going through the new workflows and processes specific to their team, whether that be IT, HR, facilities, what have you. I also show them how to, I take a few of the leads from the teams and make them project admins and show them some of the project level administration that you can delegate to them, like configuring new SLAs that they don't have already, automation rules, updating or adding new request types to the customer portal. And just taking the time to do this, just from a global admin, a Jira admin perspective, it really takes a lot of time off of my hands, as well as give them the ability to do what they need without coming to me as a gatekeeper, preventing them from doing their work. We also have chat ops involved as well. So for both of our customers and our agent users, we set up some Slack channels as another avenue of support. So for IT, for example, we actually have a channel set up for all employees to ping that channel if they need our IT team's attention. The goal here was to have a forum to easily direct those users to create a new submission or a new request in this IT Service Desk project that we created. We also have a channel directly related to Atlassian administration specifically, so those agent users can post their questions in there about how to use the tools we've enabled for them to use. Overall, we take the teach you how to fish approach. If people ask for help and it's something that they can do easily on their own, we often take the time to teach them how to do it instead of just doing it for them. In a lot of cases, yeah, it might be easier to just do it for them, but in the long run, if they understand the processes and how they can do it themselves, they no longer have to bother you for your time, and they can probably also help socialize it with others within the organization to prevent those users from even coming to you in the first place as well. So our efforts to enable support teams to support our organization using Service Desk has been wildly successful. As an example, the IT support project we created to kick off our use of Service Desk has more than 10,000 support requests come in from our employees and be addressed by the support team since we rolled it out last September, I believe. This comes out to about 1,000 to 2,000 requests per month, and this is handled by a team of only 10 people. The success we achieved here with the IT support project allowed us to demonstrate that these processes work and are scalable, which has helped us onboard all of our other support teams that are now using Jira Service Desk at AppDynamics today.
So all of this sounds really cool, right? But why did we go straight to Jira Data Center instead of sticking with cloud or going into server? Because our organization develops software for a living, anything that assists in building, testing, or deploying or tracking our product development is considered mission critical and simply cannot go down. AppDynamics also has engineering offices all over the world, so there is no convenient maintenance window to schedule upgrades. Jira Data Center allows us to maintain an up-to-date Jira environment with all of the new features and security packages without impacting developer or support productivity. Here at AppDynamics, we use the cloud identity provider Okta in order to ensure our onboarding, offboarding, and security audit of Jira and Service Desk are in line with our other technology systems. We needed a solution that included native SAML support. Jira Data Center comes out of the box with SAML functionality, so there was no worry over conflicting plugins or third-party support or even newer versions of Jira, maybe, that might break our SAML integration. So now we know that we can upgrade anytime we want on our time without worrying about working all weekend or all night. Jira Cloud also has a limitation of 2,000 users until this morning. And while that is plenty of headroom, for most successful organizations, AppDynamics has grown beyond this threshold. And we needed a solution that could scale as our organization grew. So technically, while choosing server or data center would have solved this need, our reliance on our SAML authentication was really what drove our main approach to choosing data center. And we felt confident with all of this information that we had found our tool of choice for this foreseeable future. Also, in today's world, making a decision for the moment is usually already too late. When is the last time you thought to yourself, man, my city really has their traffic patterns and construction needs well thought out and under control? I know I haven't. I live in Dallas, and it feels like the state tree or the state flower is a construction cone, right? So now that we have a platform that we can scale to meet our user count, how can we be sure that performance can actually keep up with our ever-growing enterprise? Since Jira Data Center allows us to horizontally scale our architecture, we felt confident that through our internal automation, we could continue to use this model for years to come.
So we've covered how our support teams are using Jira Service Desk to help our organization function, but what about teams outside of support? Now, as we mentioned earlier, Jira is the tool our product teams use to track work for building the AppDynamics product. Our team supports the entire Atlassian suite and how it's used at AppDynamics, not just how Service Desk is used for support teams like we've covered in our talk today. So after a year of using Service Desk, we've actually been able to pick up and learn the benefits of using the tool. And along the way, we've actually begun expanding how we use Service Desk internally to solve problems that really don't have anything to do with support teams. So one of the problems we were trying to solve actually had to do with the intake of new ideas and initiatives for our product. We didn't have a streamlined method or a single point of entry for new ideas that our product managers could review. Our sales engineers in the field would often just contact product managers directly via email, and we know how easy it is for conversations to get lost in email or no action items actually coming out of just ever-long email threads. So by taking advantage of the features of both Jira Software and Jira Service Desk, we created a request form in our existing AppDynamics Help Center that I showed you earlier. So we actually use a hybrid of both Service Desk and software to allow our stakeholders to submit new ideas through a user-friendly Service Desk form. So once this new idea is submitted, a request is created in the Service Desk project and then immediately closed out and copied into a software project. We created this hybrid to take advantage of the easy-to-use submission form that you see here, for anyone in our company to use. So if anyone in our company has an idea for the AppDynamics product, and whether that be a sales engineer, whether that be myself, or anyone, no matter what their experience is with Jira, they can use this form to submit that. And this also creates some visibility across multiple teams within the organization to take advantage of the features in software, such as using Kanban and Scrum boards for our development teams already familiar with these types of boards.
So I want to thank everybody for coming out today. Hopefully we were able to educate you on how we've used Service Desk to enable our support teams to keep our business running, and that we gave you some useful takeaways that you can apply as soon as you're back home from Summit. At this point, we'd really like to open up the floor to questions to help address specific use cases or anything related to Service Desk for your support or other teams. And I believe we're going to have a microphone that we can run around with if anybody does have any questions. Anybody? Any questions?
Hello, thank you. So we want to introduce Jira Service Desk to our HR teams, and I'm expecting some resistance from that. Can you give some tips about how you were able to get them on board with that process?
Absolutely. So we went through several iterations of that. Starting before we introduced Service Desk at all, when we were working out of Jira Software. And like Alex was saying, we're still iterating, agile organization, right? So we started out by trying to track onboarding, offboarding in our IT project, but then there's concerns over employee confidentiality. What if it's not necessarily public knowledge that somebody's leaving? HR is very sensitive to that type of information. So what we ended up doing to sell that point was really doing that hands-on that Alex was talking about, sitting down with them and showing them if we pull this into a separate project, then we can lock permissions down pretty heavily. And on top of that, using issue security, because these features of Jira Core still apply to Service Desk. So we can use all of the nice Service Desk stuff with project-level security and then issue-level security for very high sensitive information. And we got them on board with offboarding. That was the first one that we did. We tackled one point. Then we did onboarding. We're still iterating through the onboarding process, but we have them ramped up in it now. And we've recently launched a new piece for our field sales because of people changing managers and regions changing a lot. We found we were missing a lot of people that were moving around. So we've implemented a technique for manager changes and assignments through Jira Service Desk as well, with using the approvals functionality.
I think I saw a question back over there.
Oh, yeah.
Hey.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. One question around automation rules. So when it comes to automation rules, basically it's like if then. In the section of the then, have you experienced any challenges around working with custom fields, for example? Because that's like a limitation that we're facing in terms of, when you build some automation rules, very often natively out of the box, the rules doesn't provide you the option to modify custom fields.
Are you wanting to modify custom fields or base it off of a condition based on the custom field value set currently?
Well, basically, I think both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at the then statements for conditions, there's no problem working with custom fields at all. You can basically, like the then statement can be just based off of an advanced JQL query. And any JQL query works with any custom field. Now, as far as setting custom field values, I don't believe those work out of the box. I believe it's limited to some of the system default fields. But I think you can do things like leave comments and things like that. But we have, in our organization, we do have some workarounds for things like that. Like we also have the automation for Jira app that we've installed. So we use some of those for our edge cases that we aren't able to fulfill using the built-in stuff, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's also important to note that things that you can do with Service Desk automation change depending on the version of Service Desk that you use.
Right.
So if that's important to you, I would strongly recommend that you continuously upgrade to the latest, because every new Service Desk release includes more options for automation. And a couple versions back, they added webhooks. So if you don't have a budget for add-ons or for apps from the marketplace, then you can actually use the webhook and then parse the webhook on your own server and then rewrite it back as a REST call to do your automation that way.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Michiel from TomTom. I'm wondering, do you have the issue where you get tickets, receiving them through Jira Service Desk and on the back end transferring them to Jira software projects?
Yeah, that's kind of a training issue for sure, because we've enabled our users to move things between projects because we would rather have the flexibility than limit them from that entirely. So some of our Service Desk teams do move into like regular software projects. That's not something that we traditionally recommend to do. What we do recommend doing is creating separate tickets, then linking them back to that original request that came in. So if you have a request that came in to your IT Service Desk and this requires another team's input, you should create an issue within their project, within that team's project, then link it back. So that conversation can happen outside of that. Now, if it's a quick question for another team, you could mention someone in a comment or add them as a request participant or something like that, and have an internal comment on the original request that came in, so that if it's not customer friendly or it's not something the requester should be seeing, that's also an option to you. But we generally don't recommend moving support requests from project to project. If it's for another team, have them create it in another project or create it for them on their behalf and close out the one that they submitted.
So we did get a lot of pushback to the training aspect of that in the beginning. The sell that I've been successful with is when a ticket's created in a Service Desk project, it starts all your SLAs. Regardless of whether or not your team's responsible for it, they still have to go move it, because your agents are the only ones that can see the back end of that queue, which means that somebody on that team is going to have to take time out of their day to move that ticket into the right project, and then we're not giving them credit in any of our reports or stats for the work that they're doing. So putting it in that frame of reference makes it easy to say, hey, I don't want this ticket to ever go out of my Service Desk project because there's actual work being done. Service Desk, separate from software, actually has a feature under the More option to create a linked issue. And it will create an issue in any project and automatically create the issue link for you. And once you show people that feature and explain to them the reporting needs, then they're all on board.
And they don't need permission to create it in the other project?
You do need to create permissions in the other project. So.
That's all the time we have left for questions. If you want to speak with Jeff and Alex, we just ask that you do it outside so we can get set up for the next talk. But thank you, Jeff and Alex, for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you.